Buffalo, stand up. It's the mafia. It's a Bill City. Yeah, a Buffalo Bill City. Yo, it's a Bill City. Yeah, a Buffalo Bill City. Yo, we got Josh Allen, got Step Diggs, we got Cole. Deion Dawkins, cause you know it's about to snow. Mafia, you know we on a roll. No competition and it's not even close.
Folks, welcome into a brand new episode of the Folding Roundtable, the new show from Trainwreck Sports and the Buffalo FAMBase. I'm your host, Wake from Trainwreck Sports, the Crowdless Podcast, and Trainwreck Fantasy Sports Podcast. Find me on Twitter at Wake Jotkins. And before we get into the 53-man roster, how the Bills are stacking up against the rest of the AFC, allow me to introduce the fantastic people sitting alongside me tonight. First, in the middle, on the top row, you guys see him on the Crowdless Podcast with me. Free Money Football, Trainwreck Fantasy Sports, founding father of the Dart of the Day, our guy MereKat. He's on Twitter at MereKat. Cat on the right, on the top. My main squeeze from the Crowdless Podcast. This is our second season doing it together, so we're excited to get into that. Also is on Bullet Points tonight covering UB Wagner, and UB was up 14-0 after the first quarter, so tune into them. Yep, horns up for life, baby. Sorry, not sorry. It's Kevin Massare on Twitter at Kevin Massare. Next up, a little bit of a late edition to what we love getting as many people in here as possible. Great friend of Mookie Hawkins, and you might have heard those two on the radio together last night. Sean Vaccaro, SV the Don. He's on Twitter at Bills World. Then in the middle there, Clay Troia from Buffalo Fanatics, film analyst. I can say that word properly, I promise you. On the right, Robyn Mundy, Buffalo FAMBase editor-in-chief, godmother of Bills Mafia. And on the bottom, God, this guy just has the worst taste in food ever. But you know what? He knows football, kind of, so we bring him in for those takes. Leave your Reese's takes out of here. He doesn't like peanut butter and he's not allergic. It's Ryan Sullivan, Sports Rock 2 on Twitter. Guys, it's fantastic to be here with you all. Lot of Bills to talk with the 53-man roster. Robyn, you and I were talking a little bit earlier, and you told me you were taken a little by surprise about the Jacob Hollister not being on the roster. So maybe talk about that a little bit to kick off the show here.
Yeah. I was a little surprised. I don't know what happened because I thought that he was slated to be right behind Dawson Knox, but he got injured. Didn't he? Wasn't he out, I think, one of the preseason games? And I'm not sure if that kind of put him in the doghouse or what, but I did think it was interesting that they just outright released him, didn't even keep him on the practice squad. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I was happy to see Tanner Gentry on the practice squad because I think he's going to do a good job. If Cole Beasley goes down, watch out. Tanner Gentry has got hands of glue.
Yeah, we talked about his hands of glue before, and right. MereKat, obviously, we know that Isaiah Hodgins also on the practice squad here as we have it up on the screen there. Also, Jake Fromm cleared waivers. It was not picked up by anyone else, so he's on the practice squad. MereKat, when you're looking at the practice squad here, surprises to you, 53-man roster surprises, just overall thoughts, because I missed the Crowdless Podcast with you and Kevin last night. Love to hear your take.
So honestly, nothing that surprising. Me and Kevin both talked about it. They brought back all their own guys, minus that 16 spot, which we saw them make a move for that tight end today. Fine, that's all right. I wish it was an offensive tackle because we're kind of missing that right now. But other than that, no major surprises. Keeping two QBs, a little weird, but they must see value in Fromm. Me and Kevin discussed possibly they have him in line to be the backup next year once Trubisky leaves, because obviously Trubisky's going to move on. And Davis Webb isn't that type of guy. They don't want him to be the backup quarterback. They want him in the quarterback room because I've been saying that he's going to be a QB coach, offensive coordinator once he retires. He's a great football mind. He's the type of guy you want around. Great relationship with Josh Allen. We don't want to lose those practice races anytime soon. So other than that stuff, nothing crazy. I mean, keeping 7 receivers, even though, sorry, Ryan, we got Stevenson to the IR. The 2 tight ends, it made sense because Reggie Gilliam was going to make this roster with how he's played and performed throughout camp. And even though he's listed as a fullback, he's really a tight end. He's an H-back. I know Ryan and me have both made the comparison to Scorin Dorn Dickerson. He's just going to be doing it all for them. So although Hollister did surprise me a bit, it makes sense. I'm happy for Tommy Sweeney. That dude's got glue hands. We're talking about glue hands. It looks pretty well post-injury, post-sickness last year, complications. So it's good to see him back.
Yeah, and we talked about on the 585 report last night that there just maybe is a redundancy in Reggie Gilliam and Jacob Hollister, and the fact that I think Hollister probably would have also kind of played H-back, maybe a little bit less of a blocking back. And you look back at Brian Dable offenses when he was an offensive coordinator as the Browns, even when he was an offensive coordinator for Alabama, he wasn't someone who featured tight ends. Even if Dawson Knox takes a step up this year, what's that ceiling in this offense? 400 yards? Maybe 500 yards? Even if he ups that catch rate, it's just not a position that gets a lot of yards. So when you looked at the other places that really stepped up on this roster, Andre Smith came out and had a hell of a camp, had a hell of a preseason.
Yeah.
Tyrell Dotson, someone who it's clear that they're trying to develop. And when you just saw the stuff Reggie Gilliam was doing in camp, and you saw that he could be a pass catcher and you can give him handoffs and he can line up in all sort of different places on the field, there was just, even though Jacob Hollister was a rosterable piece, it was just a redundant piece that just didn't work out. It just didn't make sense to keep on this roster.
And Clay, when you were watching film of the preseason, was there anything about Hollister's game that you didn't like? Maybe something that, maybe you had a more keen eye for than the average casual viewer? Because I personally liked a lot of what I saw.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't see anything to be worried about, really. He when he was in there, his reps were pretty good. I mean, it looked like he was a guy that definitely could have made the team. So it was a little surprising to see him go. I thought they were going to end up picking him back up once they got a couple guys on IR. But yeah, I mean, he looked fairly good. Now, I didn't take a close look at him in his blocking game. It was, I was looking around for everybody, so I didn't really pay attention to his blocking. So that could have been what did him in, because Sweeney and Knox both are pretty good blockers. Knox maybe not as much as Sweeney, but those guys can do a little bit of everything. And maybe Hollister wasn't so much of that kind of guy.
And Kevin, I know on the cap, we have been, vocally concerned about Dawson Knox taking that step. Can he be the tight end one for this Bills team? As hopefully we can keep Sean Vaccaro in here. I see he keeps dropping out. Hopefully we keep you in here, Sean. But Kevin, does this release concern you whatsoever? I'm not concerned with Dawson Knox. Personally, a lot of the great tight ends dealt with them early in their careers, and I'm not saying he's going to break out and be a Kittle, but he could be, if we're going to talk in fantasy football context, a low-end tight end one, like a tight end that's in the top third of tight ends in the league.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a difficult one because I don't love Dawson Knox. I think his drops come often, and it happened in preseason this year. It's happened in camp. It's difficult for me to buy in without any plan behind him. Khalil Waring behind, that the third round pick, who was by all accounts the Bills draft pick, based on some things that we saw across Twitter today, that their old intern had a graphic made for him at the pick, and he went one slot up before him to Houston, which was an interesting note that maybe they liked this guy a little bit more pre-draft, more than Dawson Knox. He's bounced around to 3 teams now. Now he's on his 4th already. Some of that's injury related. Some of that was just 2 teams in the matter of a week here. But he's an interesting guy to watch in the practice squad. He's the one member, the 16th member that they didn't, we didn't have, yesterday for the graphic that they just added. So it's going to be interesting to watch a player like him with 3rd round talent already released. If things went awry for Dawson Knox, that could have been him too. So, 3rd round talent. I think I would love to have a consolation up here. Tommy Sweeney, hasn't played meaningful football in a long time. It's going to be tough for me to just put my eggs in Dawson Knox in one of the best offenses in the NFL. It's an important position. Travis Kelce beat the Bills almost single-handedly last year in the AFC Championship game. So it's an important position group. I don't have a lot of confidence in Dawson Knox, so anything he brings to the table for me is bonus. But that's where I've been reading about Emmanuel Sanders being able to get in some of those zones, into some of those areas that a tight end would. So, Dawson Knox is going to need to do a lot to really earn my trust and my confidence in big time spots. I need more than just running over somebody after the catch. I need to see him be consistent, and I need to see him catch the ball and limit those drops.
Yeah, and SV, I know you were. Oh, sorry, Robyn, go ahead.
No, I was just going to toss in that I thought it was interesting that Nate Becker got cut too, because he'd been on the practice squad for a while. And I think his replacement is Quentin Morris, because he did stick on the practice squad, and he was my favorite tight end in the MAC. He destroyed us at UB a couple of games, as I recall.
Mm-hmm. But he was a star. He was a star in the MAC for sure.
Yeah, and he's got good hands. I don't know what his blocking skills are like, but I saw some of his highlights, and I remember when he played against UB, he was the real deal. So maybe they'll work on developing him as well.
And one person that we've heard a little bit about, especially from Sean McDermott today, actually, with skills, is Devin Singletary, someone who people are starting to get more excited about as preseason has gone on. And I don't know if there is someone, but maybe between Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who Bills fans thought like the least of out of everybody that's on the team right now, especially after last year. Clay, when you're going back, you're watching, film from last season. We've talked about it a lot on the Cap, but we're not really, we're not film guys, and you are a actual film analyst, quote unquote. So, were you, was it offensive line? Was it, they were just struggling as running backs? It was probably a combination of both, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, it was definitely both. And, running is tough because you need all your linemen to be doing their job, or at least doing their job well enough to allow those running backs to get past that first line. And then sometimes, a big problem that we have with our linemen, I don't understand it. They have a really hard time blocking linebackers. Once they get to the second level, they have a really hard time of getting in front of those guys and keeping them in front of them. So that was one of the things that was an issue. But then the running backs, were also, they had their flaws as well. Sometimes the vision wasn't there. There's a lane that they tried to go through. Maybe that wasn't the best option for them. But I mean, from a comparison from last year to this year, Singletary, the biggest change that I've seen from him so far is his explosiveness out of cuts. Last year, he's always been shifty and he can always kind of cut on a dime. But after he does that, he's not, he never really can get back up to speed very quick. And, he usually can get tackled from behind at that point. So to look at him now, once he gets out of that cut, he is just exploding through it, getting back up to speed. And it looks like he's able to kind of carry his momentum a little bit better than he was in previous years. So that's kind of what I'm most excited about, to see if maybe those small gaps that the line allows, maybe he can skirt through them really quick and get to that second level.
Mm-hmm. And SV, I know you were on with Mook the other night, or just last night on the radio. Give us a little hint of what you guys were talking about. What did you come away from that conversation thinking about this Bills roster?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. I thought, obviously the releasing of the tight end, only carrying two, I think it's fine. And we obviously went D-line heavy. And I think in this year where we really have a lot banking this season on getting to the quarterbacks like the Mahomes of the world, later in the season, especially in the playoffs, I'm all for going D-line heavy. The one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and I thought this was more of a compliment to Saran Neal, that we only kept 5 cornerbacks. I think that says a lot, that he's very multifaceted, and that that Brandon Beane and Coach McDermott always like that position flex, and the fact that we're only keeping 5. I kind of half expect us to maybe play, maybe the first couple of games, then maybe look at adding a veteran corner. I think those are the main things that we took away. But happy to see that we did keep those D linemen, to keep that fresh rotation going, so that we can get to the quarterback and hopefully be in maybe the top 5 or 10 in sacks this year.
Yeah, and obviously helping us, get to maybe being in the top 5 or 10 teams in sacks. Rousseau, Basham, obviously Bam Johnson traded away. Personally, my gut reaction to the Bam Johnson trade was really a 6. That's it. I feel like that was a lot of people's first reaction, but it's one of those things you kind of have to think about more, and seeing Lawson go for the exact same compensation, a 6th round pick. were any of you more disappointed even after kind of coming to terms with it? Or is it just, there was a logjam at this position? Brandon Beane was vocal. He was on live television on NFL Network making his case. Hey, we have a lot of D linemen. We want to trade one of them and we're getting calls. Like, was the 6th round pick disappointing to anybody?
Not to me, honestly. Daryl Johnson was a good piece. He was coming into his own as a defensive end, although if he had stuck on the roster, he was really just going to be a special teamer. So to get a 6th rounder for that, which I hope he thrives, given, more snaps on defense and stuff. I think he can be a contributing pass rusher, but he's the odd man out if you want to keep Obata, because you're not going to practice squad Obata. Obata's coming off a very good pass rushing season, like efficiency-wise, very good. He gets to the quarterback. He could prove he does that. You're obviously not going to get rid of any of the young guys or try moving them to the practice squad. Epinesa, safe. And then that leaves Hughes and Addison. I think Hughes is a bill for life, minus, Indy trying to ruin him as a linebacker and getting him labeled as a bust before they took Calvin Shepard off our hands. But other than that, Addison, but who's going to want Addison's contract at his age, even though he's still someone who's going to produce for you? He didn't have a bad year last year. And Mario Addison's not bad, although his contract's not great and him taking reps from these guys isn't great. I don't think we were going to move him. So Daryl Johnson was the odd man out, and you're not going to sneak him on your practice squad, in my opinion. So getting a 6th, I'm cool with that. Gives him an opportunity to shine too. He was nothing but awesome here.
And I think at some point he had his chances to earn reps. This pass rush was not good last year, and he could have found his way onto the field, and he didn't. And at some point, you can be a great special teamer, and that's only going to take you so far. At some point, you got to prove your worth on the field. And this is a roster that has a ton of special teams only guys. Saran Neal, really a special teams only guy at this point. Tyler Matakevich, really a special teams only guy at this point. I think maybe in a world where Mario Addison's contract isn't borderline uncuttable, maybe they could have, he had that June 1st distinction because you could have spread it out a little bit. But he had a chance. He could have beat out F.A. Obata, his contract. You could have got out of that one as well, and he didn't. And I think he'll play, like MereKat said, he's going to play a long time in this league. If you can play special teams at a high level, you can play a long time. Look at Tyler Matakevich. He's made a nice career of himself, but you know what?
Paid too.
And he got paid. But you know what? Tyler Matakevich is going to be out of here next year and go to somewhere else on a $3 million deal. Andre Roberts, elite at what he does. He has to go take a job with the Texans. He can't stick with somewhere because you can only have so many of these special teams only guys. And I think you said it perfectly, Wake. And I think that's what got lost in this whole discussion, that Shaq Lawson, who is a better edge rusher and better defensive end than Bam Johnson, we got the same thing. And, I think that 6th round pick, looking at this bigger theme, looking at the bigger picture as Josh is paid, we're going to need those draft picks, whether it's going out and maybe getting a veteran cornerback who's, on a rental at the deadline, or maybe target, or, just getting more lottery tickets in the draft next year. And it's just something that I think it just made sense for this team. And I don't think there's really any fault in it.
Yeah, especially with the way that this regime uses their draft picks. Like Brandon Beane has incredibly high success rate. The worst pick of this, since McDermott even came here was Zay Jones, and that's before Beane was here. So there's only so much that you can say about that pick, to be honest. But it's just another lottery ticket, like you just said. I'll take them all day long. I mean, say what you want about Saran Neal. He's not a starting cornerback by any means, but that's a 6th round pick that turned into at least someone who can valuably contribute on a rookie deal for 4 years. Like that's exactly what you want out of your draft picks, especially them late there. But you did bring up the quarterback, and it seems like in Buffalo we've been facing quarterback controversy my entire life, and now we just can't escape it. Josh Allen in a Buffalo Wild Wings commercial? What? Okay, now, why are people mad? Like, actually, why? Like, I found like Facebook groups can be, what's the polite word? Does anyone have a polite word to describe Facebook groups now?
Overzealous.
Thank you, MereKat.
That's a very good word.
That's a very good
a little overzealous at times.
Yeah. I can't
Kindly
even spell
put.
that word. But you see Josh Allen, you see him do that commercial, then you see his girlfriend, posting barbell just right after. This is quarterback controversy in Buffalo in 2021. So let's all just take a moment, just be thankful for that right there, because there are so many other things we have to be worried about this team right now. Not so many, really one, and that might be cornerback 2. So Clay,
Don't
again,
keep Kevin going.
Film guy, and no, Kevin, stay muted if you want. Play the film guy. A lot of people, justifiably so, about going into a year with Levi Wallace as CB2 again. Is it that bad? Is it that bad of a thing to go into season with Levi Wallace?
No, definitely not. Levi Wallace is a solid cornerback 2 in the NFL, and I will defend that point into my grave. Like I know people give him crap. He's a pretty good corner. Like, he stays on his man pretty well. Sometimes he gives a little bit too much separation, but when he does, his closing speed's pretty good. I would say that that's probably his weakest thing, though, was closing speed compared to Tre'Davious White. So when you look at Trey, like, his closing speed, when he gives any amount of space is like nothing. So watching Levi's a little bit different. He's a little bit slower on that, but he has pretty good coverage. And, he's not going to be a top 10, top 15 corner, but like, that's fine. That's not what you need a guy opposite Trey White. You just need a guy that can go out there and handle himself in most situations. He might give up something deep here or there, but his technique's really not that bad. His hips are pretty good. He's not as bad as people lead out to be. He definitely is not an issue. And I was kind of, pounding the drum for Dane Jackson for a little bit in the offseason, because I did like a lot of the, intangibles and instincts that he has. But Levi Wallace is the number 2.
And also just the potential. I talked about it, I think, last week, either on this show or on the Crowd Assist podcast, the potential of having Dane manning that, secondary like they did in Pitt together. There's chemistry there that could be untapped. Maybe not this year, but next year, as we start to move on from eventually, unfortunately, Micah Hyde and you know what, Tom Cooper? Sure. Why not? Text me, Tom. But Robyn, I saw you on Twitter earlier. Levi Wallace spoke to the media today, and you were just impressed with Levi.
I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
This guy, we call him Levi, you're never going to take my job, Wallace, for a reason. He just keeps coming back. He's a journeyman. I wouldn't put him, his ceiling is kind of a very good corner, but not not elite by any means. I'll tell you, the guy, honestly, that I was most disappointed about losing today was Nick Macleod. Mm-hmm. I was kind of hoping he would stick. I thought he looked pretty good in the preseason games.
Yeah, I'll agree with that as well. When we were watching some of the film this preseason, Nick Macleod was a guy that was standing out. And I was a little sad when he got cut. I wasn't sure who that extra DB was going to be. But yeah, when he got cut and then scooped up, I was pretty sad about that one.
Yeah, and obviously I think it was Elijah Griffin that made it to the practice squad. And, he impressed too in the preseason, for what he was. But yeah, no, Nick Macleod was definitely something that hurt to see go, but luckily that's the only one we saw go. A lot of teams like to bring back their own guys, keep their draft picks, keep that continuity going, keep building on it. Luckily the Bills were able to do that too. Kevin, I missed the cap yesterday, so I completely missed out on MereKat's takes. What else did you guys talk about yesterday that we haven't hit on this in the folding roundtable yet?
I think the number one thing was that, look, 27 people were claimed across the league, only one Bill, and the Bills have a really good roster. So people like their own players. And we've talked about that, immensely. Like, that's why you could put a guy like Isaiah Hodgins through waivers. It wasn't really that much of a risk. You lost Macleod because he played pretty well in the preseason. He was one of my favorite players this preseason as well. The Bengals are like, yeah, absolutely. We'll take a shot on a young corner, whatever. Our roster sucks. We'll bring him in and, hopefully he can compete defensively. And add something to it. So I think it was good to only lose Macleod, and really, if you're looking at a big picture, it's got to be one of the first times in a long time. Even a little, they did a little last year with Jake Kumaro in terms of picking up other players. This year, 15 of 16. That's really liking your roster. That practice squad's made to be, adjusted. Yeah. Try another offensive lineman, not your own, Jamil Douglas or of the world, Brandon Bryant's of the world on your defensive line. mean, they got to keep pretty much everyone that they wanted. So that's kind of what we touched on. Yeah. I mean, Jack Anderson, a guy there. Rashad Wildgoose, a draft pick. So they got a couple draft picks on here. Isaiah Hodgins, obviously draft pick last year. They love Mike Love. No pun intended there. And Cam Lewis, a UB local, who I think is the first player up, believe it or not, off of this list, if needed, if something happens with Taron Johnson. Did beat him out last year, guys, in the middle of the season. The injury that they'll point to the injury. So I think injuries is a big deal for this regime. And,
availability.
Only Taron Johnson's the only player that ever gets to be out every single, 3-4 games a year and still keep his job. Other than that, it's not very common that they like to keep injury prone players. And they must have felt that way about Jacob Hollister, to be honest, because he just went and signed with Jacksonville, and he's going to have a good chance to play there down south and really be a weapon for Trevor Lawrence. So I'm interested. How it all turns out it was an interesting play here, but overall the practice squad looks good. There are guys there that I think the team can rely on. And especially the DBs, is interesting there. There's a couple of DBs there. Josh Thomas, there's a couple of DBs there that you're going to see play in a Buffalo Bills uniform this season.
And Kyle Ryan. I was thinking Kyle Williams. Jesus, Ryan
Kyle Williams in the room.
Yeah, right.
Bring him in the round table.
They look a lot alike.
Similar physiques.
It would, but
both former players in the league.
Everyone, come on. Right. If people follow you on Twitter, Ryan, they know that, and I'm not talking about food. I promise you, they know that you were very pro, not McKenzie, not really anti McKenzie, but pro someone else returning kicks. So now that we're here, we're where we are, the roster is set. Talk about where you started with that take and if it's evolved at all throughout the summer. Because, people with Andre Roberts, like that was a point of a nerve that it struck a nerve with a lot of Bills fans last year.
So it devolved a little bit in the memery, but I talked about this with Bruce a couple weeks on the 585 report.
Yeah.
McKenzie became a legitimate wide receiver in camp. Last year, I thought I underestimated the skill needed to be a gadget player in a complex offense like this. This was part of it. And I saw 300 yards, and I thought you could replicate that. And he had a really good offseason, really good training camp, and he earned that spot. So credit to him. My concern, one of my other concerns with this was that with the interchangeableness or the replaceability of that position, coupled with the fact that after he lost that job in 2018, the return job in 2018, he never got to sniff that position again. Like I've said before, he wasn't even the backup. Micah Hyde was the backup. He doesn't return kicks. He catches kicks. So there was obviously a lack of trust there for 2 straight years with that position. Yeah. And he showed it this preseason. He muffed a punt. And I stand by with all this said. Isaiah McKenzie was the better receiver in camp. He earned it. He'll be probably wide receiver 5 on this team, and he might have a better year. That's awesome. I think I'm still concerned about him returning kicks. He had one really good return. He also saw him muff it. I thought Stevenson really looked like the more natural returner back there, even outside of the touchdown. He seemed like he had a little bit more spark, plays where he was getting stuff where there was nothing there. So I'll be concerned until I see 4, 5, 6 games out of McKenzie where he's not muffing punts, because the last time we saw him have that job consistently, it didn't end well for him.
Yeah. No, I mean, there, of course, the Denver return last year, or, not the Denver, Miami return. What was the return last year?
Miami.
I have hurricane brain right now, I swear. Ever since this hurricane came to Long Island, I have not been thinking straight. But yeah, no, that Miami return obviously is going to live in people's minds, but, it's more than just the splash plays. You need consistency at the position too. And so hopefully that's something we'll get from him moving forward. But we got through half the episode talking about the 53-man roster. There are 15 other teams in the AFC, in case everybody forgot. I know it's been a while since we've talked about, the Jacksonvilles and the Denvers of the world, but there are other teams out there that could be at least exciting this year. Will they give the Bills trouble? Maybe not, but it's good to paint a whole picture of the league. So whoever wants to go with this first, who do we think is maybe a team that just, maybe in Bills Mafia, we haven't talked enough about as someone that could, at least, impress in this conference?
I'll kick it off with a team that I've been hyping up on, like free money football and such, taking to make playoffs, team total overs, player props, all of that. It's the LA Chargers this year, and it's mainly because of Staley and Justin Herbert. Joe Staley coming over from the LA Rams, that team. Anthony Lynn, God bless him. I wanted him to get the head coaching job here when he interviewed and such. He was not good in LA. He bungled a lot of games, a lot of situations, managing that roster as a whole, and they were in a dark place. So to win, I think 7 games last year with Justin Herbert, with how they were coached and the close games they lost, they were like 5-7 in 1-score games last year, which is an absurd number. Just to have that many 1-score games. And they still saw success because they have playmakers on that team. And this offseason, they made a lot of good moves on that defense, on that offensive line. They completely rebuilt it for Justin Herbert, who was the second most rushed quarterback in the league last year, and still put up 4,300 yards and 31 touchdowns as a rookie. He was incredible. Now he's got a better offensive line. He's got his weapons returning and healthy. He had some, nice draft sleeper guys like Josh Palmer and Trey McKitty. I actually really liked that offense. Defense is shored up. You bring in a new coaching staff. Staley, I think, is a genius. You saw what he's done with the Rams defense the past few years. The Chargers are a team I think could sneak into the playoffs as a wild card out of that AFC West, and they might be able to make some noise because Justin Herbert is really good, and it's not like the Bills completely dominated them last year. I mean, it was just a 10-point win.
Yeah, they're a very, very good football team, and they're a team that could help out the Bills too, taking a win away from the Chiefs in that division right there. Like that's what you need. Like you saw them almost lose to the Raiders last year. Like they're not a perfect football team. There is no perfect football team in the NFL right now. You could argue the Bucs are up there, but they had a bit of a cushy schedule going down the stretch that made that defense just look way, way better than I think it actually is. But yeah, no, the Chargers are a team that I think could, Bills fans might endear themselves to a little bit, rooting for them, rooting for Justin Herbert. But honestly, like, I don't know why. But I find myself looking at the Broncos. Like, that's a really talented roster if you just don't look at quarterback. Like,
minus quarterback, it's an incredible roster. The offense, I mean, that wide receiver core, give Josh Allen that. No disrespect to ours, not saying I trade our wide receiver core for theirs, but that young receiver core is so talented, so much talent, and they're being wasted right now. It makes me sick.
Well, that defense is going to be like, I think, freakishly elite. I think that's I think that's going to be like a top 5 DVOA defense. Like that's going to be freakishly good.
Yeah, that's a Tyrod Taylor slash Rex Ryan combination team though. Like I think they're going to be good, but can you say they're better than 8-9 this season?
No.
It'll be like that 2014 team.
Exactly.
Very into that 2014.
That's exactly what I think of.
Yeah. And they have Ronald Darby.
They'll play a bunch of like 9-7 football games or something like that.
And like the worst part of their team last year was the secondary. That is where they completely put all their eggs into that basket. Now, Bryce Callahan, who was a starter for them last year, is on the trade block. Their secondary is absolutely loaded with Darby, Kyle Fuller, Pat Surtain, who they got in the first round of the draft this year, and their safeties are really good too. So like that's a team that could probably win more games than they should. But
I hope the Bills make that phone call for Callahan, by the way.
I was really hoping. I said that if Brandon Beane trades for Bryce Callahan, I'm going to start a beer snake at the home opener, and I'm probably going to do it anyways. But are
you not going to start a beer snake anyways?
Yeah, I you know what? I'll start it off with 2 beers instead of 1. Okay, I'll do that. But a lot of talk in the AFC West right now, and we're probably not going to talk much about the Raiders unless we want to talk about John Brown being released. Actually, yeah, let's talk about John Brown being released for a second. Yeah, what did happen there? I think he just asked to be released, right, Clay?
Yeah, he requested his own release from the team. So I'm not sure if maybe it was because they decided to keep Peterman and he was like, I can't be here anymore, and he was like had to get out. But so that's my only guess. But I'm not sure. Maybe they weren't utilizing him in a way that he felt he could be utilized. When he came to the Bills, He wasn't a number 1 wide receiver. He wasn't even a number 2 wide receiver when he came to the Bills. So, for him to go out and kind of showcase that he can be a guy that gets a lot of targets and he can get a 1,000-yard season and be really productive. Maybe he wasn't seeing himself in that kind of a role with the Raiders and said, maybe I can do this somewhere else.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It looked like he was like kind of lining up to be like the 4th or 5th receiver too, because Henry Ruggs is that one. They love Brian Edwards and the work he's put in this offseason.
And Hunter Renfrow.
And Renfro's that third guy. He's just locked in. And then behind them, he just wasn't getting the respect. So, I mean, he got paid, what, $3.5 million to spend the summer in Las Vegas? Good for you, John Brown.
I just don't know how likely it is that he actually comes back here, unfortunately.
No, he won't.
I feel like that's more of like a fun talking point than it is like a reality.
There's no spot for him.
Exactly.
Me and Kevin brought up there's a lot of good receivers, young receivers who were released yesterday out of practice squads and stuff that it would just make a lot more sense to try to poach somebody like that if we wanted to. If we didn't already have receivers we love on our practice squad. And I'm just assuming we love Isaiah Hodgins because I do.
Don't forget the Bills are willing to put veterans on. They've been trying to do it. I mean, I think that was the play with Hollister. Who's like, hey man, you want to be on a practice squad? He's like, no.
Yeah.
But don't forget the play there was. I mean, they did it last year with Stills. They did it with Freeman. They're willing to bring in skill players on the practice squad. If John Brown's like, you know what, I love Josh Allen, and if I have to wait for an injury and get make some money, I'm already making a ton of money, like you said, from Vegas. If I had to make a practice squad salary and wait for my turn and to be plug and play. Maybe he takes it to be in a top offense. Obviously, he's going to look for that receiver 2, receiver 3 job somewhere. Might not come. And he's like, and Brandon Beane's picking up the phone saying, hey, man, you interested in coming over to the practice squad? You saw Stills on it last year. We'll get you up if we can. I mean, but love to have you in as a reserve. And maybe he does it. Maybe he does it. Maybe he has a chance to resurrect something saying, I'm healthy. I can go there if there's an injury to one of the receivers or a COVID outbreak. And the next thing you know,
exactly.
Plug and play John Brown.
I thought that it. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was gonna say I think it'll be. I think he'll have a very clear choice. He could probably go to a real bad team like Detroit, who's got no one right now, or he can go play for a winner, which could be the Bills, could be New England, could be a good where he's gonna have to kind of sit on the sidelines. And he'll have to pick what he values. Does he want to go and try to win a ring, or does he want to put up some numbers and maybe earn a bigger contract in 2022?
See, I think that there's a shot for him to maybe land down in New Orleans with Jameis Winston. He could literally be their number 1, number 2 receiver until Michael Thomas gets back. And then if you think about it, that's Michael Thomas, Marquez Callaway, who is everyone's favorite preseason player except for Jarrett Patterson or Ramondre Stevenson, maybe. And then
Traquan.
Michael Thomas, and Traquan. Yeah, so that's a really good group of top 4 receivers right there with Jameis Winston, who I really think he's not as bad as everybody really makes him credit for. He's the only guy to ever throw for 30-30, but those are just Hoff numbers.
He's going to throw the ball.
Means.
I mean,
J-Boo's the man.
He'll give the ball a chance. He'll throw it up to anybody. So
yeah.
Have you seen the offseason workouts? He's in prime form. He's getting hit with giant ball sacks. He's having knives thrown at him. He's lighting his feet on fire doing the ladder drill. It's electric. This guy's ready to absolutely take the league by storm again. Maybe not in the best way.
Bona fide football guy, absolutely. but Ryan or Clay, one of the Buff Fanatics guys, someone that we haven't talked about a lot that could be more exciting than people are giving them credit for in the AFC.
Yeah, I don't know, Ryan. You want to take honestly for me, it was going to be the Chargers. Honestly, they're another. I also kind of feel, and the thing about the Chargers is I feel like I've been saying, hey, Chargers might be good this year. I feel like I've been saying that for 5 years now. So maybe it's finally time for them to actually be good and not get hurt and not lose every close game that they're in. So yeah, it was Chargers for me as well.
That can happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this might get me burned a little bit, or maybe I have PTSD. But I want to preface it. I think Mac Jones is bad. I think he's bad.
I had him outside my top 50 prospects.
But you look at the offensive line that they have, the New England has. You look at the defensive line that they have. You look at their coach. If they're a team that can constantly get in positive game script situations and just run it a million times with Damian Harris, and I think I think that's a team that could maybe win 9 games, 10 games, and sneak into the playoffs. And maybe it's my PTSD. Maybe it's just years of Bill Belichick beating our ass. But I look at that team and like it's not a terrible roster. That secondary is a little meh. Their pass catchers are a little meh. But if they can get into games into the third quarter and they have a lead or tie game and they're not playing from behind, that's going to be a really tough team to play, I think. And I don't think the Bills are going to run through them. And I would not be surprised if they make the playoffs. I don't think they'll quite have the roster to go and win a couple games in the playoffs, but I absolutely think that that's a team that I think that we maybe got a little too high on ourselves, have written off that I think they might get second in the AFC East, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, second in the AFC East is actually kind of really wide open, and it's really just because there's so many unknowns at quarterback within this division. And I was looking at this one article that I saw. I sent you guys earlier from The Athletic. Mike Sando put it out, and he interviewed 5 executives from the NFL and asked them to rank every team in the AFC from 1st until 16th. And one of them decided to get really cute and put the Patriots at 3rd. So can anyone try? Ryan, explain that to me.
That's way further than I'd be willing to go. I mean, I think there's a world where they're good. I think there's legitimately a world where they're good.
Yeah,
but
I'm looking at the chart.
I don't think there's a world where they're 3rd in the AFC. Good. I think there's a world where they win 10 games and sneak into the playoffs type of good. So maybe it's a former Patriot, maybe it's one of the guys in the Texan front office who clearly aren't too smart but came from New England. So I think that's probably who it's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the chart. It's like one guy ranked him a 3, and the next highest one is a 7. So like the 3 definitely as an outlier kind of pushes them up the list a little bit. I mean, I think they're going to be an okay team, but 3rd best is a really, really big reach. And I mean, Bill Belichick's a defensive coach. He can get you wins with his defense. And I think the problem now that Cam is not the starting quarterback is that Mac Jones can move the ball down the field. You know, he's not really probably going to throw you these deep balls or splash plays or anything like that, but he can drop back and hit a guy, and he can do that consistently. So that's, I think, the biggest concern is like, yeah, sure. I mean, they're probably going to run the ball. They're going to run a lot of 22 personnel, but Mac Jones can hit people, in a zone or on quick routes against man. So I think that, if the defense turns out being really good, they could be a problem just because of that.
Yeah, I mean, Matthew Judon's terrifying. I mean, I wish we played them in the first 6 weeks of the season when Gilmore is guaranteed to be out. I mean, like, I'd never, as much as I hate Stephon Gilmore, I'll never root for an injury, but I saw that and immediately was like, oh, please play us between the first 6 weeks of the season. But, they could be, I think their floor is the same with Mac Jones, but I think their ceiling is just a little bit higher because there's more unknown. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
I mean, the defense is going to be solid. And it's still Bill Belichick, and if Belichick, he might be a robot, but if he's even 1% human being, he's going to be pissed about last year. Like, he's just got to be. Tom went without him, won the Super Bowl. The Patriots had their worst season in 2 decades. Quarterback turmoil. I mean, he's got to come into this season with a chip on his shoulder. I know that's weird to say about Bill Belichick, but if he's a human, it's got to be true.
It's just shout out Asante Samuel Jr. from the Chargers that one of the cornerbacks we wanted the Bills to take this past year said that Bill Belichick without Tom Brady is just another coach, and if that's not Bill's Mafia, I don't know what is. So I think I might be getting for Tom, you can sponsor this broadcast. Thank you, Tom.
Brought to you by Tom Coop.
Tom.
Okay, I have a question. What about the Cleveland Browns?
I'm happy you said that. What about Robyn? What about the Cleveland Browns?
Well, they're sneaky good, and they've got it all put together. Baker is, I think, finally coming into his own. He's never going to be lights out, but I think he'll always be a very efficient quarterback, and they've been kind of waiting in the wings the last couple of years, and I think this could be their year. in that division at least.
Yeah. I mean, their defense is definitely scary. And that might be putting it lightly, to be honest.
Miles Garrett, are you kidding me?
And that secondary is no joke. I mean, Denzel Ward, like that is its group. That is a team. I've been in Guillotine League drafts a lot, and I'm in another one now. And I've been avoiding Travis Kelce in the first round because he gets the Browns week 1. And that's a matchup that could actually lose you a Guillotine League if you take him with your first pick and don't have another one for 30 picks. Like, that's a little scary for me. So the Browns are definitely terrifying. I liken Baker Mayfield to like Alex Smith a little bit. Like he's rarely going to be like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but he's capable of having those good years if you don't ask him to do too much.
He's very efficient.
Well, that's my question with them. My question when I look at Baker Mayfield, was last year his Jared Goff year where he got a really good offensive mind behind him, who there wasn't a lot of tape on, and he kind of balled out. And then this year it's going to kind of be a regression back to earth. Or is he independently a good quarterback? He did play well down the stretch last year, and he does got some better traits than maybe an Alex Smith. So I think a lot like the Bills last. I think they're built similarly. They don't have as good of a defense as the Bills last year, but I think it's a very similar storyline to the 2020 Bills going into the season. How good is that quarterback? How far can that quarterback take him? Can that quarterback win him games? If you can make that Josh Allen switch, where Josh Allen was really the guy kind of being carried by the team to being the guy that can win them games, I think that's where it is. Can he be the guy that wins you games as opposed to the guy that you're winning games with?
That's a good point.
Who would have thought that Baker Mayfield was a year behind Josh Allen?
I mean, and Ryan brought it up too about the Jared Goff point with is it the offensive mind and Stefanski really bringing it up? But I watched a lot of Mayfield last year because these guys always interested me. I didn't know if I absolutely loved him or absolutely hated him coming out of the draft, honestly. Just a very confusing prospect for me, kind of like a Zach Wilson this year. And watching him last year, I think he showed real progression in his game and his decision makings that, led to his most efficient season yet. And that was without Odell Beckham Jr. So I'm kind of afraid of the Browns because I think we saw Baker take a real jump last year, mentally everywhere, every aspect of his game. You saw it on the field, off of the field. He's kind of got this thing down. I think Stefanski is the right guy for him. And just a side note, every time I watch Cleveland, it makes me sick seeing Wyatt Teller out there because that's like one of two bad Brandon Beane moves. Yeah. It's just like, man.
Well,
we could use a nice guard this year.
That's the take I saw all over Twitter where it was like, Bam Johnson's going to be the next Wyatt Teller.
They're very, very different players.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can see Bam maxing out at like 6 sacks in the right system or so. I can see him contributing on a defense and not just special teams in the right situation, but I don't see him becoming an all-pro.
I think one of the scary things about the Browns too in their offense is they're two-dimensional. They have really good running backs and they can run the ball really effectively. So pairing that with a Baker Mayfield that is improving and is becoming more efficient, that's what makes that team so scary.
And a quarterback in Baker Mayfield that doesn't need to latch on to a number one wide receiver, mainly because he can't support a wide receiver with Odell Beckham. Like I don't know what goes on there. I'm not going to say that he can't support OBJ as a number one wideout. They really haven't had maybe the chance with OBJ's injuries and just various off the field things maybe to get that cohesion down. But we haven't seen that happen yet. And then I just Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt that's just an unfair 1-2 punch at running back. Like a lot of teams, maybe the Bills included, would kill to have Kareem Hunt off-field stuff aside as their starting running back.
Like they were after him. They were after him when he came back from the league. That was it was well documented that the Bills had a good running back room, so he didn't pick the Bills, but they wanted him. So it makes sense that's true. I mean, for me, it comes down to what qualifies this category, right? You're talking about the best teams in the AFC. Are you talking about just to me, the Browns would probably be 3. I mean, they're 3 or 4 already. So if you looked on
with what, the Ravens?
Ravens, yeah. I mean, if you look at that whole division, any of them, really the top 3 could fit this category. And then the team I love to talk about, the Indianapolis Colts. They gave the Bills.
I didn't know which way you were gonna go.
They gave not the Titans.
Yes.
You know better. You know better than to bring up the Tennessee Titans.
Unless it's Anthony Firsker.
Yeah, unless
my
it's
sweet
Ferkser.
prince. I love Ferkser.
But if
sweet
you look
baby
at the
boy.
Colts, that team's solid everywhere. I mean, it just depends what you think of Carson
They
Wentz
are.
and right in the COVID situation. I mean, that defense, you're talking about good defenses. I mean,
Mhm.
they're good. I mean, the DBs are good. You know, Xavier Rhodes, Kenny Moore. You have TJ Carey there now. You have Darius Leonard. I mean, you have Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner,
I
Grover
love
Stewart. I mean,
Kwity Paye
Solid
this year.
roster.
Oh my god.
you have such a good defensive roster with the offense and the running game, a good offensive line we've seen, you know, great running game in Jonathan Taylor. I mean,
And
I
Naheem
think-
Hines.
Yeah, and
And
Hines,
Naheem
and
Hines, yeah.
Marlon Mack's still there.
He's not nobody.
Jordan Wilkins.
No.
I mean, they have like a ridiculous running back room right now.
Good
Yeah.
O-line. Receivers are, you know, a little hit and miss there. But you know, we know Carson Wentz has done more with less at times. And times when Wentz is focused, I mean, he's a good football player. I mean, I like Michael Pittman Jr. I'm interested to
I do
see
too.
how he looks in that offense with Carson Wentz. It's a team to watch out for, though, because
And
I don't
Frank
like
Reich.
a lot of teams. Yep.
Mm.
And I don't like teams in the AFC South very much. Especially, I just quite frankly think they could be a threat. And they came to Buffalo. Philip Rivers played awesome. And team was really good with their dual tight ends that we couldn't cover the entire game. You know, Jack Doyle, Mo Cox. I mean, struggled against it all game to the point where it got interesting toward the end of the game. So I would watch out for Indy. I think they can catch you by surprise. And it's a team that I have definitely somewhere in consideration with the Baltimore Ravens, with the Cleveland Browns. If Carson Wentz is able to at least be Phillip Rivers, that's a team to watch out for. And I was, you know, they scared me a little bit at times.
Yeah.
And I think that they're a team that I wouldn't overly want to see in the playoffs.
No, absolutely not. And Kevin, I hate to do this to you, but we talk shit about the Titans so much, and I just need to hear I need to hear two other people who don't hate them as much as you, me, and MereKat. So Ryan or Clay, just general thoughts on the Tennessee Titans. I personally think their defense they're going to be like the Falcons, where they have the offense that can keep them in most games, but that defense could just be terrible.
Well, I hope their defense is terrible because I think that they have a very good offense. So in order for them to not be a threat, then we're going to need that defense to be pretty bad, because the whole offensive side of the football, I mean, it's just a bunch of massive dudes at every skill position.
Greg Thompson would be so happy.
Yeah, it's a really just bunch of big dudes on that offense. Derrick Henry's a beast, and I think he's going to be a beast and for a long time still. And then you've got like two of the biggest, strongest wide receivers in the league as well. And people don't give Ryan Tannehill enough credit. Ryan Tannehill's a really good quarterback. I think he's fringe top 5 from last season. He played really, really good football, and people don't give him credit for it.
I agree.
But you know, they're scary. They were a scary team last year. You know, we kind of had our wake up call against them last year. We play them right around the same time this year, and I'm hoping it's not a similar situation. Just because it's a good team. It's a good team, and they can definitely win some games. So they're one to look out for, because I think they could either be really good or really bad. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
So I picked the Ryan Tannehill regression last year, and I kind of wore it a little bit.
Yeah.
Now Arthur Smith is gone, and I think the question is how much of that how much of his success was predicated upon Arthur Smith play calling, because you know you can keep the same system, but ultimately, you know, it comes down to who's calling the plays. And can Todd Downing have the same feel for the game and have the same success calling plays on a drive-to-drive, play-to-play basis that Arthur Smith had, and draw up that same success for Ryan Tannehill? Julio Jones is going to be a big help, but a guy with recent injury history, he's not necessarily injury prone. He's played plenty of 16-game seasons, but he's getting up there. He's getting near that kind of where wide receivers start to have injury issues and start to kind of hit that wall a little bit. So there is concern there with no other and then you have AJ Brown, obviously. So they have the skill position players there. For me, it just really comes down to that coaching. I'm just really curious. Yeah. I'm not going to say Ryan Tannehill is going to regress. I just want to see how this offense looks, what this offense looks like with Todd Downing. because, like you said, it's regardless of who they added on this defense, Elijah Molden, Caleb Farley, it's just
those guys are good.
It's still not going to be enough to carry them, though.
Especially as rookies, yeah.
So I'm not doubting them because I wore it last year, but I want to see.
Yeah, no, totally get it. But as much as I love shit talking the Titans, the folding roundtable must come to a close eventually. But before it does, for the two newcomers, myself, MereKat, Kevin, and Robyn have all given our Bills record predictions. I tried to, but I jokingly said 17-0, and then Maniac didn't let me go back. So I said 17-0, and I apparently have to stand by it. But Ryan and Clay, give us your record predictions for the year, and then we'll get out of here.
I'm going to go 14-3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going 12-5 just because I think they'll miss out. They'll lose some. I think they won't have as much luck in some of those close games as they did last year, but they'll still win plenty of games.
You can't rely on a Justin Zimmer fumble to win you. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I thought I was the resident 13-4 guy, but I mean, I could see totally a 12-5 stretch. I think that's a good prediction because it's just football, man. One little COVID outbreak, one bad bounce, one luck chuck, one fumble, Justin Zimmer. It doesn't happen next year. Maybe Mac Jones doesn't fumble it there. I don't know.
And Tom Cooper of the Folding Roundtable, presented by Tom Cooper, also believes in 17-0. So that is all the verification.
No, by Tom's Gourmet Hot Sauce.
Tom's Gourmet Hot Sauce. My Venmo is at Wake Jotkins, Tom, if you want to pay for. Just kidding. But this does bring us to the end of this week's episode of the Folding Roundtable. We will be back next week because the NFL season is actually upon us. That's ridiculous. I didn't think that was going to happen, to be honest with you. But we'll be back at 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. just because obviously there's Thursday Night Football next week. The Cowboys and the Buccaneers. Going to be a great game. We're going to have some great guests to talk about that and week 1 against the Steelers. But until then, Wake, MereKat, Kevin, Ryan, Clay, Robyn, and SV the Don, who unfortunately his Wi-Fi was too weak for him to stay in here. But please go follow him on Twitter. He does some great work too. Awesome guy. We all know it. Same time next week, same place, but well, actually different time. I have the sign off that I had planned out, and now I can't use it. Okay. Different time, same place, different lineup. Doesn't flow as well. Regardless, good night now. Thanks for tuning in.